the organic ecosystem fascinates me. So how we work from soils to tree, to pruning, to thinning, to a peach that you can drip down your chin when you eat it. That whole system is what I love about organics. And it's so unknown. I mean, we know so little about soils and perennial fruit systems. I'm Steve Ela of Ela Family Farms here in Hotchkiss, Colorado. My family has actually grown fruit in western Colorado since 1907. We've started organic farming in 1994, and the farm became 100% certified, I think, in 2004. Before that, we were conventional farmers, and at this point, I would never go back. You know, if something happened that I couldn't be an organic grower, I'd just probably put up the for sale sign and move on and do something else. So start with sweet cherries, peaches, pears, apples. We do have some plums, and we do some organic rhubarb and heirloom tomatoes as well. I love being an organic grower because I love ecosystems, and we grow perennial trees that are here for 20 to 40 years. We grow cover crops. The whole thing is a system. We have to think multi-year no matter what, because they're trees. Every year is different because the weather is different, the trees respond differently. We have different rainfall, cover crops behave differently, the insects behave differently. I mean, some years our predators are ladybugs and other years are lacewings. Well, what makes that shift in any given year? There is no doubt that I could farm for 100 years and still be learning from this system. My goal as a grower is to not externalize costs. You know, not have nitrate leaching in my groundwater, not have soil erosion that floods rivers, not lose phosphorus, and not have some of these things that we as a society subsidize otherwise, but to keep those costs on the farm and account for them and take care of them. My granddad actually was one of the first people to plant cover crops in orchards. They were all clean cultivated up to that. And he bought a rotobeater, a mower that could mow the cover crops, and that was really innovative. We have a newspaper article from the 50s of showing, you know, this innovative thing. And obviously, and so we've always had cover crops in our trees. We've managed them differently than we do now, but my goal, and we're not there yet, but my goal is to grow all our own fertility on the farm. And so we're planting our cover crops, we're planting legumes, we use a lot of alfalfa, Dutch white clover, hairy vetch. We're certainly looking into some of the other ones that we need to play with more. We have very shallow topsoils and very deep clay subsoils, and alfalfa is one of the few roots that goes down that subsoil. Most other plants hit that subsoil and go sideways. And so alfalfa, I think, is really critical in our system to build that topsoil layer deeper, to bring minerals up from below, have water channels through that subsoil. We're running 3.5% organic matter, so in these soils that's 1.5, 2 points above normal. One of my hopes for organic farming, I think, is in the whole climate change model that we're facing, is that organics can, the carbon sequestration side of that, of how much carbon we're tying up and holding on to and helping on that thing. I hope organics get a lot of credit for that. There's very few insects that we actually have to control. So aphids and mites and those things are biologically controlled if we don't screw the system up. Codling moth, which is the worm in the apples, if we don't control that, we're going to get eaten alive. So if we're going to control it, how do we control it without screwing up the rest of that system? And that's when we were conventional. Invariably, you'd put on the worm spray, the codling moth spray, and then you'd have to put on an aphid spray, and then you have to put on a mite spray. And those are really harsh sprays, and they're also, mites especially, are really good at developing resistance. So you're on this treadmill. Whereas once we got rid of those materials, aphids and mites disappeared from the system. They're there, you can find them, but you need some food for the predators, and I don't even scout for them anymore. It's just, they're a non-issue. If you look at our insect control program, it's really the result of research in the last 20 years. And so, for example, for codling moth for worms, our first line of defense is mating disruption, pheromone mating disruption. So we're putting out dispensers with the pheromone that the female insect emits to attract the male, and we're blanketing the orchard with that pheromone. Those pheromones are very specific to that insect. So we're not disrupting anything else by putting out mating disruption, but we're controlling codling moth. And then our second line of defense, if we see that with mating disruption they're still finding each other, is a virus. And it's a virus that's specific to codling moth again. So it's one of those things that you can apply it, it doesn't affect any other insects, it doesn't disrupt the system, it hurts the insect that we're going after, And it's a virus. I mean, essentially, it's like releasing ladybugs, except that we're releasing a virus. And I think that's really elegant. In this spring, in fact, we came out and green peach aphid, which can sometimes blow up. And it was a little ouchy there. At one point in the spring, it's like, oh, this may be one of those years that they're going to get ahead of us. And 2 weeks later, you couldn't find them. And, ladybugs and everything else have moved in, and off they went. And you look at the trees now, you wouldn't even know they were there. I still hear organics can't feed the world, and I just don't believe that. I think if you compare our peach production to conventional peach production, we can equal it. Apples maybe not so much, but other things we can do better. And so I think if we did more research on organics, if we had the equivalent amount of research money into organics that we've had in conventional, those arguments would go away. If people take a taste at our farmer's market and walk away, and then they turn around and come back and buy it because they're stunned, that's a good day. And that means we're doing our job. And the more we do that with carrots and broccoli and tomatoes and all these things that people should eat for health, but we make them enticing and stunning, then the 5-a-day program isn't even needed, because people just want to eat those things. We as organic growers need to be proud of what we do. But I think also one of the concerns I guess I do have in organics, and it's just my own personal philosophy, is I think we have to watch about making claims that it's the best or anything. I think we can always say our goal is to be the best. That's what I strive for here. Can I tell you I grow the best peach this weekend at the market? Well, that's up for you to decide. You can go around and taste everybody's peaches, and mine are best. Great, that's what I want to be. Sometimes I hit that, sometimes I don't. And so I think as organics, we have to be wary of that we are dealing with complex systems and we don't know everything. And so I think it's the wording of striving for betterment and to do things better is really critical, instead of saying it's just the best. And that's in this area, as we've seen conventional growers not become organic, but soften up their programs. Oftentimes it was giving them space to where they didn't have to be wrong. It was just talking about, wow, when we took this out of our system, we saw this. That was pretty cool. And so there's no judgment. And it's more of, and then suddenly you see some of these hardcore growers going, I don't know if I should spray because I might not want to take that out. And you're like, bingo. And so I think that's, giving people room to change gracefully and to learn and to be proud of what they're doing is really important. And so, and even as organic growers, to say, yeah, maybe we're not as good as we could be, but that's the direction we want to go.